Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
3, 2, 1, and we're back. And Julie, it is June the 22nd. You did send me a story this morning from Housing Wire. I don't have a subscription, so I can't open it, but I got the gist of it, and you did read it.
Yes.
So would you like to summarize it?
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot. Let's see. It basically gave very similar points to what we did in our podcast series about a month ago now. Just laying out the facts, and most of it centered on the fact that new construction is still not keeping up.
We didn't tell them the title of the Housing Wire story, and so we're doing this out of context. But here's the moral of the story, is that Julie and I were telling you guys, it was probably more like 2 months ago, why there's not going to be a housing crash, and we've been telling you this probably for at least 6, maybe 8 months. I actually remember doing shows probably this time last year telling them why there wasn't going to be a housing crash, right? For all the same reasons.
I think by then we had gotten through the main scare of COVID, that it was all going to hit the fan.
Right.
Things had calmed down a little bit, and we were just starting to present that kind of thought pattern.
Right. And a lot of people are still almost seemingly hoping for a housing crash, despite all the pain and suffering it'll create. Yeah. And we've been doing, as we always do on this podcast, give you guys the direct, no BS, fluff-free, way of thinking about life in general, but business specifically as pertains to real estate. And there is no housing crash looming, and Housing Wire was basically using our points from our podcast almost exactly.
Yes, and their two main points were, number one, in a more normal situation, we would just build our way out of an inventory problem. But because things got backed up, they actually tracked it back to 2007 to 2009 when builders stopped cranking out the inventory and never really ramped it back up. Then COVID hits, they stop again, and now pretty much everything they're building is already got a contract on it. And so that's going to take a while to work through, and we're not going to see just like seas and seas of new construction. Well, we talked about that. So that was part A of their article. The second thing was, what about all the forbearances? This has been the story, is that there's going to be people that didn't get their job back, that are severely behind. They're not going to pay their forbearance back. Well, they went through, I think, 4 different likely cycles. The first one being people are getting their jobs back. The economy is growing. People are hiring, and that they put that as the number one cause.
Let's be careful there. Yeah. Economy is not really growing. It's just going back to where it was prior to COVID.
But there are jobs is the point.
People are going back to work, but growing compared to the way it was during COVID, definitely growing.
Yeah. So probably people are going to get jobs back, Then the second one was that they will get employment, but it won't be to match what they used to have, which will cause lenders to still work something out. Maybe they'll do a lot more loan modifications.
But that wasn't true either, actually, because now we have wage inflation that's actually causing people to get paid more than what they were getting paid prior to COVID. I mean, you going back to work, for the most part, people are going to be they're going to be able to command higher wages. And there's also an employee shortage, because some people they're not going back to work, right? A lot of people are just choosing to stay unemployed or stay on enhanced unemployment benefits and all these other things that are happening in the economy that are unique to this time in history.
Yes. Well, their point was, even if for whatever reason, because they've been on unemployment or whatever, people don't get reemployed to the point where they can catch up their forbearance, and they have to let go of the house. So even in that scenario, as we pointed out on our podcast, there is plenty of equity out there. And the likelihood of somebody actually being upside down to create a short sale, and remember too, it's not until you have no equity that you're okay with foreclosure for most people, because what difference does it make? You get to live in your house for free.
And by the way, listeners, that is what happened last time. People basically were, it's sometimes just they owed what the house was worth, but they could rent the same house down the street for less than what their house payment was, especially since their house payment just adjusted because it was on some sort of short-term adjustable rate mortgage. Well, none of that's happening now. No. And I remember correctly, there's a record amount of home equity. Like, there's more equity in residential homes than there ever has been in the history of forever. Yeah.
Okay, so thus you can still be behind on payments, an extendo forbearance, and not have a job, and you're still not a distressed, in terms of financial seller, you're still probably going to be able to sell your house, pay all that off, and walk away with some money.
That's right.
And in fact, I had a case, I listened to a call. This is from Dan in Reno, actually, and this person had been in their house for 12 years with no payments. I think that's a new record, at least what I've heard. But what he's doing is the person actually knew all of their numbers. Dan's going to do a net sheet for them. And they're going to see, and then the script becomes, which is best for you. You can I can get this for your house. You can walk away with X amount of dollars, or you can stick it out until the bitter end. Well, which is best for you.
You're touching on what Dan in Reno is doing. It's one of our sources of seller leads. Is basically you call old defaulted sellers, because oftentimes they'll have defaulted, and this is, I know, a mind boggler for many of you, but people are actually able to stay in their houses for years if they essentially know how to work the system, which virtually everyone does. The information's readily available. I just think that how many of you are listening to us that actually were around in the last housing crash, and there weren't very many of you. Truthfully, most of the industry turns over so fast. I bet you of the maybe 20, 30,000 of you that are going to be downloading this show, I bet you very few of you were in the business back then. By maybe 5,000 of you were in the business back then. Well, there's people that were in default back then that are still in default and haven't had to move out of their houses for a whole variety of reasons. And to Julie's point, what they were doing is they were going in default and stopped making their payments. Maybe they couldn't make their payment, but in all actuality, they just stopped making their payment because they knew they could live in the house for free. That did happen, is happening. So fast forward, now these people are going to be have equity in their houses. In some cases, like Reno, they're going to have a lot of equity in their houses, so they can actually sell the house. A good skilled agent is going to have to negotiate, or an attorney is going to have to negotiate with the lenders. Usually there's two, and then that seller is going to be able to walk away selling the house on the retail market with a realtor, with you if you know how to do this, and the seller's going to walk away with the check, and the listing agent's going to walk away obviously with the check, and as will the buyer's agent. Moral of the story here is that you have to learn how to go after sellers in this market. And everyone's saying, well, when's the market going to improve? I'll tell you, when's there going to be more inventory for sale? When there's more agents that know how to actually create the listing inventory is the answer.
That's right.
We're all hoping and praying the builders are going to turn around and start building more. Well, they're going to eventually, but it's not going to be in the price ranges that you think that they should be building in, because they're not going to make enough profit because the expenses of everything have gone through the roof. And we're just getting started.
Yeah, well, it all comes back to supply and demand, doesn't it? At the end of the day. Now, before you guys start thinking, evidence of foreclosure, keep in mind that Dan makes hundreds of calls a week and maybe has uncovered 2 of these possibilities. So they are randomly out there. But the difference between somebody like Dan and a lot of the agents that never dealt with that is that he thinks to himself, I'm going to at least run the numbers and give this person an option.
Well, he knows how to help them.
Exactly.
He has a
versus
skill
how many
set.
agents say they hear upside down, foreclosure, distress.
Don't even know.
I can't help them.
Right. Well, I mean, they don't even know what to do. They don't even know what those
really
words
know
mean.
what it
Right.
is.
Upside down. What do you mean you're upside down?
Exactly. So don't worry about it, because most of you aren't going to have to deal with much of that. But the point in that story is help people where they are.
Well, you might have to deal with a lot of it depending on your market, right? I mean, if you're still in, I'll give you an example. If you're in New York State, I promise you that there's thousands of people basically that are in the situation that Dan experienced out in Reno. So if you're in New York State, you're going to find thousands potentially of people that are in various stages of default that have equity that could actually get their house out of default and sell the house, and you could help them do that. No, you think there's very many other agents that are calling the sellers and telling them how they can retail the house and walk away with the check? They're getting calls. The sellers are probably getting calls and letters from wholesalers, from flippers, from all these other types.
Even from buyers door knocking for themselves.
Exactly. So you have to be proactive in these situations, and that's one of the things. It's one of the many things that we teach you. 20 different lead sources for generating listing leads. If you want to learn how to be a listing agent, because clearly that's where you're going to have the most freedom. That's where you're going to have the most financial benefit. That's where you're going to be able to help the most people. You need to become a listing agent. We've made it easy for you. Just text the word success to 47372, and then we're going to link you over to our website, and you can join Premier Coaching. Or if you'd like to, you can just go to timandjulieharris.com, and the first option under coaching is Premier Coaching, and you can join Premier Coaching, guys, for around $100 a month. Now, obviously, we teach you how to build your complete real estate business, and when you become a Premier Coaching member, you are essentially are enrolling to learn a real estate system. It's not just one thing. We're not just teaching you social networking, your listing agent stuff, or buyer agent stuff. We're teaching you all different ways to build your business in a very duplicatable and predictable manner. That is what the Premier Coaching System is. So you can just go over to timandjulieharris.com and go to coaching, click on Premier, and you can join Premier Coaching today for around $100 a month. So, Julie, what do we have for these guys today?
Yes. Okay. So this is a little bit off the menu, but that's kind of the point of it also, is to gather at least some of your intel, your education outside of the real estate field. I try to do this so that we keep things fresh and we're not, always rehashing things. But coaching clients and listeners have been asking for help deciphering difficult situations, negotiating, dealing with potential conflict or sometimes perceived conflict. So what to do when you're feeling really out of sorts with the situation. Okay, so I read a whole bunch of different things, many of them not in the real estate wheelhouse. There's something called the OODA Loop, OODA. It's a 4-step process of making effective decisions in high-stakes situations. It involves collecting relevant information, recognizing potential biases, deciding and acting, and then repeating the process with new information. That's why it's called the OODA Loop, is you lather, rinse, repeat, right? Okay, so one such military model, this is a little bit in your wheelhouse.
I'm
with
listening.
Your stuff,
I'm reading this for the first time.
Yep.
This is good.
Okay, so developed by strategist and U.S. Air Force Colonel John Boyd, the OODA Loop is a practical concept designed to function as the foundation of rational thinking in confusing or chaotic situations. OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. So that's something easy to memorize. Observe, orient, decide, and act. Okay, here's a quote from him. What is strategy? A mental tapestry of changing intentions for harmonizing and focusing our efforts as a basis for realizing some aim or purpose in an unfolding and often unforeseen world of many bewildering events and many contending interests. Okay, so I wrote in our notes, note to self, look for new ways of thinking outside of your real estate world. And even Charlie Munger is known for this kind of gathering of information.
And Charlie Munger is Warren Buffett's partner. So we use Charlie Munger quotes probably more often than we do Warren Buffett quotes on our podcast, just because his in the manner in which he disseminates his content is way more practical and tactical. Warren likes to talk in, rhymes, and basically you have to spend a lot of time deciphering.
Like
exactly. And Charlie Munger is very to the point. He's very, we're very Charlie Munger in the way how we think.
Yes, and he uses this OODA Loop as part of his collection of how to think. He said, spend each day trying to be a little wiser than you were when you woke up. Discharge your duties faithfully and well. Systematically, you get ahead, but not necessarily in fast spurts. Nevertheless, you build discipline by preparing for fast spurts. Slug it out 1 inch at a time, day by day. At the end of the day, if you live long enough, most people get what they deserve. Sounds like a version of do what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at a high level. Okay.
Yeah, but notice that we said it much more succinctly than he did.
I know. Well, I think he has to be a little fancier than we do.
Yeah.
Munger is known for stating that he systematically builds what he calls a mental toolbox of knowledge. He looks outside of his own field, and that seems to have worked for him and Warren Buffett because, they've only created a return for Berkshire. Did you know it's a 20,000 to 1 return?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just
crazy.
To basically obviously acknowledge these guys, that is a case of doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do at the highest level for a long damn period of time.
Very consistent.
Because they've been in business since the 60s.
Yeah. And look at the results they're getting, right?
Yep.
So back to the OODA Loop. Observe, orient, decide, and act. It's called a loop because it's meant to be a habit of thinking that you learn to repeat and ingrain in yourself as a strategy for multiple situations, kind of like your go-to thinking method. So let's kind of hash this out a little bit. Step 1 is observe. What is the actual information you have to work with? Ask lots of questions, get accurate data so you can paint a realistic picture of what you're dealing with. Okay, so how many agents do we know that just kind of react without gathering data?
Not just agents, but people in general.
Sure.
Right?
So examples, asking the listing agent what's most important to the seller, in addition to price, of course. Another example, asking the lender what stipulations need to be resolved to approve your or the other agent's buyer. Additionally, you've got to learn to disregard irrelevant information that doesn't or shouldn't affect the situation, okay? So, and keep in mind, this this OODA Loop is originally applied to fighter pilots. because they have to make decisions like this all the time, right? And get into that habit.
Well, as you're going through this, I'll tell you where my mind went. I was thinking about when everyone's basically inundated with constant streams of information,
Right.
Despite the fact that we beg for all these guys to go media free. And if you're not filtering, because that is what this OODA Loop thing is, as I read your notes a little bit ahead of what you're talking or what you're reading, that is definitely what this is. It's advanced filtration of content.
Yes.
That's really... And it's very pertinent because oftentimes if you're not filtering the content that's making its way into your brain, you have no idea what that little innocuous thought that you picked up that you picked up from some little side thing. You don't have any clue what nasty negative side effects that's going to have on your thinking or the way you're going to approach other aspects of your life. So that's the reason that oftentimes that if you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed, and we talk about this on the show in our book, Harris Rules, a lot, one of the first and best things you can do, it's completely in your control and your power, is go media free. So absolutely prune all forms of content from, don't be going to social, don't be watching TV, don't be reading anything, because it's basically designed to trigger you. And oftentimes when you're feeling overwhelmed, it's because subconsciously you're being triggered and it's causing you to not focus on what should be the most important thing in your life or things in your lives.
Exactly. And I note to self for you, I'll be interested to see what your fighter pilot client thinks about how we're applying OODA, because he has to be familiar with this. Anyway, step 2 is orient. Orientation means connecting yourself with reality and seeing the world as it really is, as free as possible from the influence of cognitive biases and shortcuts. You can give yourself an edge over the competition by making sure you always orient before making a decision instead of just jumping in. That's again from John Boyd. Okay, examples. Calm down and think before you react, at least before you react to your prospect, client, or agent that you're working with. Orient yourself to the situation so you make better decisions. Have you dealt with this situation in the past? If so, how did it work out? Do you need help from a coach? If your past strategies haven't worked, you have to find out why and correct course. One of the things he talks about is that people get into like a decision-making default. Like that's how I always deal with it. I always like put it back on the other agent, or I always, have this script that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
Well,
that you get stuck sometimes.
But most people go to redlining emotionally.
Absolutely.
That's the normal default. Well, I mean, so
Quickly.
thinking on behalf of our clients and our coaching, clients and our podcast listeners, when you guys are dealing with sellers or buyers for that matter, or anyone really, and they become erratic, it's because they're not putting themselves through this OODA loop. They're going right to an emotional reaction because they're being fear-based and they're feeling attacked. They're not calming themselves down. They're not actually focusing on essentially having a logical, thoroughly thought through approach to how they're going to react. And so they just react emotionally.
That's right. But you can't do that along with them. Step number 3 is decide. Test different decisions for their predictable outcome. Which is more likely to get you or your client the result that they desire? So again, that's not just in real estate, but that's in life. So the decision part, step 3, is to test different decisions. If I take this stance, what's likely to happen? If I do something else, what's likely to happen? When I did that before, what happened? So you're being introspective.
So this is actually, you could expand on that thought too. This is the importance that when you're really trying to get somewhere in life, you absolutely hire a professional or follow a proven system to get you there, opposed to just trying to put it together yourself. Because you have to assume, like, I'll make it personal so you guys don't feel picked on, right? If I'm trying to figure out how to become like one of our coaching clients and our EXP group members, Michael Zawalski, he basically became a master diver, right? And, I'd probably, if I wanted to learn you and I wanted to learn how to dive, I'm going to go and hire a master diver, right? Now, I could do what a lot of other people would do is I could just kind of ham-fist it together, watch some videos, watch YouTube, do it. That's what, but if you really want to learn to do it and not die and learn to do it and have an enjoyable experience, you're going to hire a professional to lead you when you're trying to learn something new. It just intuitively makes sense, doesn't it? And yet, how coaching clients, how podcast listeners, are you building your real estate business? You're not doing what you logically, intuitively know is the smart way to go about doing it. You're not taking a methodical, following a methodical process. You're not following a proven system. You're trying to put it together yourself. You have to ask yourself, why are you doing it that way? If you really had superior business knowledge and had a form of real estate business, you would be us, frankly. But you have to earn the right to essentially have a system in place that's proven in all markets, and it takes decades. Why would you go through the process of trial and error and essentially
it costs too much.
Needless,
Costs too much time,
exactly. I was about to
money.
say money, right?
Yeah.
Why would you do it? It doesn't make sense. If you want to ascend and get to the top of the mountain or learn how to be a diver as quickly as you can, hire an expert. It just makes sense, guys.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so step number 4 is to act. Action is testing your decision out. Even if you don't get the exact result intended, you'll have added to your knowledge base and be able to OODA again. Next time, polishing your skills and strategies. So this is just really a decision-making pattern at the end of the day. But what are the 3 benefits to thinking this way? Number 1 is deliberate speed. It shortens the time you are ruminating about a decision and trains you to logically think instead of emotionally react. You can tell this came out of the military, right?
Totally.
Okay, number 2, becoming comfortable with uncertainty and making decisions anyway. This is a really big one because most people, when faced with uncertainty, do nothing, sometimes for years. Instead, be the one who takes action anyway. You can see this with real estate prospects. When they're not sure what to do, they don't generally do anything. That's why we train our people to lead with good questions.
Let me just point something out, Julie, because this is really fascinating.
Sure.
The one thing, if you look through all these points that this guy is making, and you're reading what his filters are and how to apply it, what he's doing is removing emotion.
Yes, systematically.
That's what it's. And if you're a fighter pilot and you're trying to think quickly, you don't want to think emotionally.
You don't have time to.
But why do people think that leading with emotions is a strength opposed to a weakness?
I don't know. I'm working on kind of a theory about that certain things, whether it's real estate or other stuff like that, you have like this luxury of nothing bad immediately happening to you versus a lot of our examples like sports and being a fighter pilot where the reaction, your result is so immediate.
I appreciate that. That's a practical answer, but I think if you expand upon that, there's been something societally that's shifted since you and I were kids, where basically your emotions are more important than your ability to think logically, like the OODA Loop.
Like having safe places at the airport in a college.
Right, exactly.
Because maybe I feel microaggression offended about something.
And yet when you run across Charlie Munger and all these people that have really accomplished,
they're
not like that. They know that their emotions and how they're going to think and react emotionally is not going to be where they're going to end up as far as the decision.
Sure. And it's less efficient too.
Right. But you know what it goes back to? It's ego. Because if you think that like it's your ego that tells you that your emotional intuitive response is always going to be the right one. And generally speaking, your intuitive response and your emotional response, they are not the same thing. And intuition comes from a sort of a knowing strength that comes from experience, and then trusting that experience and that muscle actually gets stronger. That's not emotion. Emotion is completely different. And here's the strange thing that everyone knows, but no one really sort of wants to register when we're talking about stuff like this, is that your emotions change constantly.
That's right.
I mean, we've been, standing here doing this podcast for roughly a half hour. And how many times have your emotions changed?
All the time.
All the time. It constantly. So if you're going to be beholden, or your results in life are beholden to how you feel, your emotional, ebbs and your flows, you're never going to do anything.
Well, it's not fair to your client either. It has nothing to do with you.
It's not fair to you. It's not fair to your family.
That's right. So it is an ego thing at the end of the day.
Totally.
Okay, let me round the bend because we've got to do Facebook Live here pretty soon. All right, so point number 3, these are the benefits to thinking this way. Becoming comfortable with, point
number 2.
Making better decisions in business and in life. Systematically training yourself to look at all the angles, consider different actions, and observe your outcomes. Again, non-emotional. So here's a quote from the biography about John Boyd. And this is a great book you can get from Amazon. Just look up his name, B-O-Y-D. Okay, so Boyd developed the OODA Loop with fighter pilots in mind, but like all good mental models, it works in other fields beyond combat. It's used in intelligence agencies, used by lawyers, doctors, business people, politicians, law enforcement, marketers, athletes, coaches, and more. So I think he's had quite a bit of impact. And that's just one of the things that he's contributed. I think he's an interesting guy to study.
So really, to get wonkish, and I know we have to go to Premier Coaching, but if you look at these points that he's making, it's these points are manifested, or they become more, I'll use the word intuitive. It's almost exactly a match to the stages of learning.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, unconscious competence.
Yep.
Right? If you look at all those 4 levels of learning, this process will not exist in someone that's unconsciously incompetent.
That's true.
Or they don't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
But it will start to manifest, or this will start to resonate with you depending on where you are. And certainly, and I think I was going to say evolutionary learning of mastering real estate skills or whatever. When you're just first getting into this, you're going to be this information will be useless to you unless you're willing to follow a system. And these decision-making tree, this sort of algorithmic approach to basically removing your emotions so you can think logically, that only is going to resonate to someone who's essentially at the point where they're consciously incompetent.
That's right, where they've recognized that they need to make that change instead
Exactly.
of just going to their go-to, their default decision.
Emotions.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, again, guys, if you want to really get control of your thinking and your outputs, you've got to lock into one particular system and stop going, we make fun of all the different things we see agents doing to torture themselves as far as oversaturating themselves with too much information. Facebook polls and going to different Facebook groups. And
surveys.
like when I see, there's certain things that we see occasionally pop up like, I just had a closing and I have money. What should I be doing with my money? Where should I be buying leads from? And then all the answers pile on. It's because these folks don't know that there is an answer, and the answer is don't buy leads. There's people have yet to learn in this industry that you do not have to essentially follow the herd. The herd is mostly uneducated from a business perspective, and they're just repeating what other people have said to them because they've never actually taken the time and analyzed the inputs and decide whether or not it actually makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And so here's a good litmus test for all of you who are essentially trying to apply the OODA Loop to your life with regards to real estate and with regards to, say, for example, lead generation. Make the filter that the logical approach going to be, does it generate profit? And does it generate profit continuously? Does it generate profit consistently? Does it generate profit predictably? And the answer for virtually everything is no, no, and no, because they don't. When you're buying business, it's never going to be predictable, duplicatable. It's never going to be something that you're going to ever have any sort of confidence in. It's basically leads roulette. And so what's the answer? Buy more leads from different sources. That's what you're being told constantly. It's all asinine if your goal is to basically have a business that essentially makes it so you're not beholden to buying business, but also so it's a profitable business. So it's something that is predictable and duplicatable. Wouldn't you love to be able to wake up every morning and know that every single day you choose to, you can set a listing appointment? You can. It's not that far. It's really much simpler than, for whatever reason, maybe you're wanting it to be. Maybe you think it's supposed to be complicated. Maybe you think it's supposed to be difficult to become a listing agent and to accumulate lots of money. But it's really not. It's just following a system and setting aside your ego and setting aside your preconceived notions for the fact that, yes, this system works and this system will get me into the end zone. Why would I waste time doing anything else?
That's right. And if you want proof of that, just come to our Facebook Live session. One of them is about to start in about 3 minutes here.
Well, that's only for Premier Coaching members.
For Premier Coaching members, because they are the demonstration of the ability to do all of this without buying leads.
So let me ask you a question about that. And I know you have to round the bend, but you don't necessarily have to do Premier Coaching anymore. We have 12 coaches that would love to replace you doing that. So why do you do it?
I love to stay in touch with what's going on and to personally help them. And that doesn't mean I have to be on every session all the time. We are going to be folding them into that mix. But, I think that if you are not in touch with your clients, you start to lose your edge. And I don't believe in doing that.
But also, truthfully, you like
the experience.
You like sharing their wins with them.
I think maybe we live vicariously through their wins sometimes. I mean, I love celebrating with them when we do on track, ahead, or behind. We do challenges and victories. So, yeah, I think it's a good part of my day.
All right, perfect. So listen, guys, on that note, so listen, if you're interested in joining Premier Coaching, which all of you should be, just go to timandjulieharris.com, click on coaching. The first option is Premier, and you can join for around $100 a month. Just do it, guys. There's really zero downside to you except for the fact that you're going to be moving forward faster than maybe some of you are going to be comfortable doing, but we'll get you there. If you need me for anything, if you'd like to talk with Julie and I about joining our EXP group, please feel free to text me directly at 512-758-0206, 512-758-0206. In the meantime, have a fantastic day.
This program has been a presentation by Tim and Julie Harris, Real Estate Coaching. For more information on our real estate coaching and training programs, visit our website at timandjulieharris.com. Remember to tune in weekdays at noon for upcoming shows. And until next time, thank you for listening to Real Estate Coaching Radio with Tim and Julie Harris.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.